What is up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another trek through the Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation novels series. I am here once again with my same shirt. It's becoming a joke at this point, but that's perfectly fine. Just know that I don't wear this besides recording, so it's not as if it stinks. I don't know, people are noting that now because they're looking through the playlist and I have the same shirt on. It's like, it's comfortable, it's breathy, and it gets hot in here when I do recording, so some people like it, so we'll go with it. But yes, continuing our journey through Volume 5 of Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation, which we're on now Chapter 7, and once again, this is completely non-existent in the anime, so keep that in mind if you're an anime only. This is not stuff that I think will ever get covered in the anime itself. It seems like as if they skipped it. I don't know how they're going to explain one particular very important character that was in this chapter that, again, they technically skipped. I don't know if maybe later on they'll explain it somehow in some other way, or they'll have a different encounter. Or seemingly it seems as if the adaptation, they believed it wasn't that important, which is very unfortunate. But with that said, yes, if you are an anime only, get ready for a treat because, again, there is a lot of stuff to really dive into here. Not only, again, a character that should have been covered in the anime, but additionally a little bit of insight into the struggles that it took for them to get to the central continent that really does spell out a lot of difficulties surrounding Dead End and the idea of improving the vision of the Superds, specifically with the church and how much they hate the demon race. But yes, we have a lot to get through, so let's jump right into Chapter 7. I believe this is probably going to be a whole video in itself because there is, again, a lot of stuff to get through here. Opening up Chapter 7, we have Rudeus and team finally arriving at Westport. Of course, this is the furthest west point of the Millis continent. He knows the usual things, such as the Westport looks similar to Zantport based on how the roads are, but it's considerably larger. He notes the route between the capitals of the holy country of Millis and the kingdom of Asura are very crucial to trade and commerce. Many towns along this path are bases to a lot of merchants and traders. Westport, being one of them, is very prominent. While he notes that it can't compare to the commercial streets of Milshan, this is definitely an area that has a lot of enterprises. With a lot of headquarters there, you have a lot of subsidiaries of a lot of those groups that are kind of packing the streets. At this point, similar to the previous port that he had to deal with, they decide to discard their carriage and their horse. He knows that there wasn't as much bonding with this horse as it was with the lizard, but he does kind of give it a faithful farewell. He even gives it a name at that point, saying, "Farewell, faithful land biscuit." At this point, he heads directly to the checkpoint. It's this large building, even has soldiers at the entrance, which is definitely different than the previous place. He starts to inspect the knights themselves. He mentions the fact that, yes, fully armored knights is kind of normal in the streets of Milshan, and it seems like it's normal here. He does see that they are very sturdy, though he wonders what the purpose of them are. He's seen such powerful people such as Eris and Rajerd and what they could do. He knows that there's monsters out there and people in this world that are so powerful and have such serious power that just one blow, that fancy armor would probably just shred and crumble. Inside the custom building, he's noting that there's a lot of adventurers and merchants around. There's tons of clerks and they're all briskly processing each of the people. He says it's very different than their experience in the nearly empty Windport. Obviously a lot more travel between the central continent and the Mills continent. He goes to the receptionist, once again notes that she is very large chested and notes the fact that yes, this seems to be some sort of unwritten rule. I think he's going to note this every single time he goes to reception, that there's an unwritten rule that they have to have big chests. He notes that he's seeking passage, and she gives him this little wooden card that has a 34 engraving on it, so he's gotta wait for his number to be called. But immediately when he goes to sit down, Eris sits down next to him. Rajerd's kind of standing off to the side, and Eris is kind of fidgety. She's like, "Aren't you going to give him the letter yet?" It's like, "No, we'll wait until we're called." And then she kind of whispers to him, saying, "Look, I think somebody's looking at me." Immediately he kind of spots there's this guard nearby, and that guard is shooting glances at her. Eris starts to kind of glare back at them, and Rudy is like, "Please don't start a fight with them." He's trying to figure out, what do these guards want? Are they captivated by her beauty? I mean, yeah, she's growing prettier over time, but she's still technically a kid, but they might be into kids. And that's the point in which his number is called. Rudeus walks up to the counter and immediately tells him that he needs passage, and then he hands over the letter to the receptionist. She accepts it with a smile, but then immediately kind of changes her tone and quickly says, "Excuse me," and she goes back behind the counter, back behind in the back offices. At some point while he's staying there waiting, suddenly he hears this large thump, and then somebody shouting. An armored knight comes running from the back room, goes to one of the other guards nearby, whispers something in their ear, and that guard decides to run out the office with a serious look on their face. It seems really ominous at this point. He's like, maybe I should have digged into this Gash character a little bit more. But still, The lady comes back up the front. She says, sorry to keep you waiting. She had this like business-like smile, but he can tell the tension in her face. She says, Duke Bakshiel will see you now. He's like, got a bad feeling about this. So all of them go back to the back into this office where this guy's at. We get a little brief description of this Duke Bakshiel von Weiser. He is the director of the Mill's Continental Customs Office. He says the hog bore a strong resemblance to a pig. The man bore a strong resemblance to a pig. He's a big man, very thick neck that kind of hid his chin. He had light blonde hair that plastered his forehead, and he had these huge bags under his eyes. He said that he had the face of a crafty, nasty old man, sitting upon this luxurious leather chair that he notes that he probably has no inclination of leaving. He was surrounded by tons of paperwork, and he was tapping his pen against the letter that was handed over to him. Shortly after coming into this room, the guy just gives this scowl of hostility towards them, which Rudeus notes, yes, sort of resembled the appearance of himself in the mirror in his previous life. Bakshiel says, to think some filthy demon would have brazen enough to come in here and bring me a letter like this. You certainly chose an impressive name. The seal looked very real, but I wasn't born just yesterday. This is obviously a fake. Following this, he just tosses the letter out towards them, and Rudeus kind of instinctively just kind of catches it before it falls. Rudeus looks at the letter, and it says, this man is a Superd. Nonetheless, I owe him a great debt. He is a man of few words, but noble in character. Waive all customary fees and see him safely to the central continent. Signed Galgard Nash Vanek, commander of the Missionary Knights. Again, it's like, kind of important, anime. Why was this not adapted? Seems kind of important. Rijerd knows the commander of the Missionary Knights, one of the 3 holy orders. That's kind of a big deal, anime adaptation, but anyways, they know better than I do. But no, Rudeus noticed the name immediately and says, what happened to Gash? He's like, who is this Galgard Nash Vanek? Was he seriously one of the leaders of one of the 3 holy military orders? Why would Rijerd know a figure like that? Said it made sense though. I mean, commander of the Missionary Knights was high in the Millis hierarchy. It wouldn't go over well if everyone knew he made friends with a Superd. So he's like, yeah, I guess it made sense why he used a false name. And he's trying to figure it out, like, how did this guy end up here? I mean, yes, technically it's been 40 years since he saved him. He probably married into a powerful family and changed his name. But yeah, Bakshiel follows it up, says, not a chance a closed-mouthed man wrote the letter like this. He detests putting pen to paper. Do you expect me to believe that he wrote this on behalf of a lowly demon? What a farce. Rudeus notes that Rijerd's like standing there with like this conflicted expression on his face. He's asserting right now this letter is fake just because it was wrote for a Superd. But it didn't make sense to Rudeus. Like, surely Gash was aware that Bakshiel hated demons. He could have wrote this letter to maybe detail it a little better, like explain things a little better, or the opposite end, could it be possibly that he's not who he claimed to be? But it did kind of connect to what Rijerd said about where he was living, this big building that had some sort of comparison to Kishirishu Castle. That probably was the headquarters of the Missionary Knights. And then that would also explain why Rijerd said that he had many men. But he realized at this point, it's not really useful for me right now to try to figure this out. Duke Bakshiel has made up his mind. So Rudeus says, in other words, you believe this letter to be a forgery, sir? He says, who are you? I don't have time to prattle with children. At this point, Rudeus is like, God, it kind of feels weird. It's like a new feeling. For once, I'm actually being treated like a child. Typically, people treat me like a grown-up when I want to be treated like a child, or treat me like a child when I want to be a grown-up. But this person's treating me like a child. But he kept that to himself. Instead, he gives an Asherin-style bow. Says, my apologies, sir. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Rudeus Greyrat. Bakshiel says, Rudeus Greyrat, you say? He says, that's correct. While I blush to admit it, a small, unworthy part of the same Greyrat clan that is counted amongst the Asherin high nobility. Bakshiel says, but the Greyrat family used the names of the ancient wind gods to distinguish themselves, did they not? Rudeus says, that's true, sir. I belong to a branch family, and therefore have no right to use one. Which immediately upon hearing branch family, he's seen that Bakshiel's eyes gave way to disdain. But before he's responding, Rudeus says, however, Lady Eris is a true-born member of the Boreas Greyrat family. He kind of clapped her lightly to kind of push her forward. She kind of looked surprised a little bit, but she didn't panic. She folded her eyes and nearly took their usual pose, but then she went down to grab her skirt to kind of do a curtsy and then realized she didn't have a skirt on. So she kind of just put her hand on her chest and did a bow like Rudeus did before. I can just so picture this, like her just like, oh. Like she keeps trying to back. It's like, okay, this ain't gonna work. This ain't gonna work. This ain't gonna work. She says, I am Eris Boreas Greyrat, daughter of Philip Boreas Greyrat. Pleasure to meet your acquaintance, sir. It was a kind of a stiff delivery, but she pulled it off. Bakshiel responds, and what, pray tell, is the daughter of an Astran noble doing here? This is when Rudeus kind of jumps in and says, you're familiar with what happened with the Fatoa region, right? The calamity 2 years ago? Well, we are two that were affected by this. And he goes on to explain the whole journey and about, Rejered helping them and coming over here, trying to get back to the central continent. And he kind of explains the fact that Eris is wearing, these clothes that she's wearing because they were trying to hide her from different ruffians that could see her as a noble and try to kidnap her. This is where things get a little bad, as Bakshiel says, oh, so you're in league with that Fatoan search and rescue squad that's causing no end of trouble in this region, aren't you? And Reese is like, what? No. I don't know what you're talking about, sir. He says, I've never heard the name of Eris Boreas Greyrat before, but I am familiar with a certain Paul Greyrat, a thuggish little man that's supposedly taking to stealing slaves by force. And he's like, oh gosh, Dad, you got a real reputation now. Rudeus kind of confirms the following. He's like, so you believe the letter is forgery. You believe that Eris isn't truly a member of the Astran nobility. And you believe that mere lackeys of a worthless lecher Paul Greyrat, who drinks all day, lashes out at his own son, has smelly feet, I don't know why that one's specific, and causes no end of Oris for his poor little daughter. He's like, yes, indeed. He says, man, poor Paul. He's trying his best out there, and this guy is dismissing him as just worthless. But no, Bakshiel kind of clarifies. He's like, look, there's tons of forgery seals out there. So that seal on this letter means nothing to me, which I point out, what's the point of the seal to begin with? He even points out that Eris is this boorish muscle girl. She's no way that she can be the daughter of Astran nobility. Of course, she's the entire time staying there with the folded arm pose. She's not scarred or anything, but he does note that she's like got a tan and she's very muscular. So that's when Rudeus kind of tries to twist things around and says, oh, you're not familiar with Sir Saros then? He's like, Saros? Oh, you mean the Lord of the Fatoa region? And Rudeus says yes, and he's also the grandfather of Eris. The man chose to nurture her talents in the sword from a young age. He's like, why would he do such a thing? Rudeus says, this is something of a family secret, but it was decided some time ago that Lady Eris would marry into the Notos family. And he says, Sir Saros detests the head of the Notos family. He's like, I see. He's kind of playing out in his head like, yes, I'm technically plotting out that Eris is some savage warrior that they're trying to marry off the Notos family to kill him in his bedroom. Something that Eris at the time seems like she's kind of puzzled by. Like, that's a good thing, though, because if she knew what he was suggesting, she'd probably beat the crap out of him and he'd be missing some teeth. He's like, for that reason, amongst others, I must return the lady to Asra. So do you insist that she's an imposter? We'll simply have to go back to the country of Milshan and file an appeal to the appropriate authorities. And Rudeus in his head's like, I really don't know who that would be, but I'm just saying it. Bakshiel says, if you want me to believe all this, then show me some proof. Rudeus says Sir Galgar's letter should surely be enough proof. He says, you're absurd, you're arguing in circles. And Rudeus says, so what if I am? Look, Duke Bakshiel, do you really want to make an enemy out of the Astran? Oh my gosh, this part right here, I was like, what the hell? He says, do you really want to make enemies of the Astran Greyrat family? And he cuts himself off right here in his own mind like, crap, I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. He says, fortunately, the threat I blurted out did seem to have some sort of effect, judging by how sharply his eyes were glaring. Bakshiel finally gives in and says, fine, I'll permit you and the young lady by my authority as a duke. I will assign a few knights to escort you. Surely that would be preferable than the protection of this demon. Rudeus is realizing right now he could just let Rejered go. But instead, he hates him so much that he's actually going to give up some of his knights to go with them. That's how dead set he is on it. That's how dead set he's on not allowing passage. He's thinking to himself, what do we do now? Do we arrange passage separately for Rejered, resulting in another bloody battle with smugglers? That's when a knock comes at the door. Yes, a knock comes at the door. This is the crazy part. Anime adaptation, what the hell? A knock comes at the door. Bakshiel's, goes to say, what? What is it? I'm in the middle of something. And before he even gives permission for somebody to enter, the door just opens up, and a blonde woman comes in blue armor. She says, pardon me, I was told a certain dead-end Rejered was here. And immediately Rudeus says, Mother? I knew who it was, but it was still one of those like, wait, why wasn't this in the anime? If he found Zenith, why Why wasn't this in the anime? But again, I technically knew who it was, but Rudeus is like, it's Zenith. My mother's right here. Immediately everybody turns and says, huh? But the lady says, I'm a single woman. I don't have any children, let alone one as old as you. Rudeus in his mind's like, what? Come on now, Mom. Did you lose your memory since the last time I saw you? Or maybe she got sick of Paul's nonsense? However, when Rudeus kind of looked her over closer, he began to notice a couple details that were different from Zenith. Now, he thinks, after years apart, he couldn't remember Zenith perfectly, but he said the shape of her face and her hair color were subtly different. It wasn't her after all. Darn. Darn. Again, it kind of sucks that I kind of know that I bet novel readers, if when you got to this point, it was probably super shocking. And that's kind of the frustrating thing, because I know based on the anime afterwards, they wouldn't skip something like this if it was actually his mother. But it does kind of suck, because I bet people reading the novel were like, what? Zenith? Like, what? Zenith? I guess he just ran into Paul, so I guess he could run into Zenith. Anyways, Rudeus is like, sorry, my mother's missing, and you look a great deal like her. She's like, I see. He's like, now she's looking at me like, with pity in her eyes. Bakshiel says, well, if it isn't our freshly demoted temple knight, do you need something from me? I'm just gonna skip and give her a name right now. Her name is Therese. But yeah, Therese says, a Superd appeared in Mill's territory. A diligent member of the order would become running with that news. He's like, you don't need to assume your post here for another 10 days. Don't stick your nose where it doesn't belong. Therese says, where I don't belong? Strange thing to say. I haven't officially assumed my duties here yet, but my predecessor already left. When problems arrive at a checkpoint, it's the Temple Knight's responsibility to address them. And yet, I seem to be the only Temple Knight in this room. Care to explain that? At this point, Duke Bakshiel is a little bit of loss for words and a little bit pale. She says a team of 2 leaders should oversee the defense of every customs post. This is an ironclad rule established by the Mill's church. Surely you don't intend to defy it. He's like, of course not. I only thought, well, you've only just arrived here. Why not take a couple days off and relax and get accustomed to the city? She's like, that won't be necessary. Rudeus is like, man, this guy looks fit for slaughter. He's like, I'm gonna enjoy the next time I eat pork. She's at this point, now then, could you care to explain what we're discussing here? At this point, Bakshiel kind of just goes to this big spiel, explaining everything from the top down, kind of adding his own assumptions in there every now and then. Rudeus kind of has to interject every now and then to kind of correct what he says. Rudeus at this point is realizing that it seems like the knights are on kind of equal footing with Bakshiel. Typically, a duke would be at the top of the pecking order, but because it's the holy country of Milis, the church is extremely powerful, and he figures that has to be the only reason that this is happening. Therese listens to everything, and at some point she goes, he definitely is a demon, isn't he? She looks over to Eris, and her face softens. She then looks over to Rudeus and puts her hand on her chin. Young man, you thought I was your mother. May I ask her name? He's like, Zenith. Zenith Greyrat. Says, and your father's? At this point, Rudeus looks over to Bakshiel. He's like, this is not gonna work. This is not gonna go over well, man. This is gonna be super awkward. Paul Greyrat. He's like, I had no choice. Bakshiel's eyes widened. He's like, I'll just have to insist that Paul's a totally different man than what he thinks he is. I mean, he's not the scumbag like he is over Milshin. Daddy was a saint. He's a guy that would give you money if you punched him a few times. I read that. I had to read that like 3 times and it dawned on me. Oh yeah, that's right. He technically found his dad, beat the crap out of him, and then technically got money from him. So he's insinuating here, all you have to do is punch him a few times and he'll give you money. But no, Therese is like, I see. And then she squatted down and wrapped her arms around him. He's like, huh? He's like, man, what the heck's she doing? She's like, I can't imagine what you've been through. Not only was she hugging him, but she was stroking his head as well. He's like, that wasn't the softest embrace ever because of the thick armor that she's wearing, but he at least got a nice whiff of feminine fragrance. He says, naturally, my little buddy downstairs didn't even twitch. He's not really sure why. He's like, hey, what's the matter, boy? I thought you liked the smell of sweaty women. Why? Just the other day, you took a whiff of Eris to get going. Rudeus. You're supposed to stop this, Rudeus. At this point, he looks over to Eris, and she stood there with his wide eyes and her hands clenched into fists. It was so terrifying. Rudeus is like, miss? At this point, Therese says, I'll be taking them under my personal protection. Bakshiel's like, what? That one's a demon. She says, this letter is authentic. I recognize Galgar's handwriting when I see it. He's like, would you be ignoring the teaching of the Mill's church completely? What sort of temple knight are you? At this point, Eris lets out an, oh. And the knight turned and winked at her. Like, suddenly out of nowhere, Eris remembers who Therese is. Like, it just kind of hits her. I kind of mentioned this in the last video. Like, this whole thing where this incident happens with the blessed child and Therese and all this crap. But the moment that she's seen Rudeus, it went to the wayside. And nothing was important but to kill whoever hurt Rudeus. And now shit finally just kind of dawns back on her, like it just returns. But yeah, Rudeus was completely feeling lost. She says, I am a captain of the Shield Company, and I'm quite serious about this. He's like, bah, a captain demoted for losing her entire unit. To which she replies, are your own circumstances somewhat similar? No, my mistake. I at least completed my mission, whereas you simply abandoned your duty. And that set him off. He's like, look, woman, I don't care how powerful your family is. This sort of insolence will not. And then she kind of cuts him off by bowing to him. I apologize. My words were uncalled for. Since I've been assigned here, I have no desire to put myself in conflict with you. However, this particular matter is of personal significance to me. I hope you'll forgive my rudeness. Rudeus was a little bit like impressed by this. Like she just totally spat in his face and then immediately apologized, and somehow it worked. And he was impressed by how she pulled that off. And Bakshiel's face, it looked like his anger was fading so fast from her bow. Bakshiel says, personal significance? To which she replies, yes, this boy is my nephew, you see. And then Rudy's like, what? What? Yes, what? But yes, this is where we talk about who Therese Latria is. She is the fourth born daughter of the Latria family, a cornerstone of the Millis nobility. She was a highly promising knight who won the rank of captain in the Temple Knights at a young age. Count Latria is her father, and Zenith Greyrat is her sister. So yes, it's Zenith's sister. That's why she looks so similar to her. But yes, once Duke Bakshiel realized that he was basically blood relative, his face took on a resigned expression. With a reluctant sigh, he agreed to waive the fare of the passage to Central Continent. And this is where we cut to an inn in Westport. At this point, Rudeus has found himself in the arms of Therese. Only Eris is with them. It seems like Rajur kind of just left the room for the moment. He felt like it would make it a little bit awkward. But yes, Therese is like, you know, Rudeus, my sister told me all about you in her letters. He's like, did she? What did she say about me? She said that you were adorable, mainly. I can't say that at first that word came to my mind, but now I get it. You are as cute as a button. Like the entire time, she's just nuzzling her face in the back of his head. Of course, her chest pushing up against him now that she doesn't have her armor on. He's like, it seems a little weird to be called cute. Typically, most people kind of describe me as creepy and whatnot. He said that Zenith technically would have been probably the only one that's ever called him cute. But he says that despite the fact that this woman's like cuddling on him and pressing her chest against him, for some reason, he says the railgun between my legs is not ready to fire off coins. He says, now that I thought about it, it never did anything whenever he was with Zenith either. And he says that I was never really interested in getting more friendly with Norn. He says maybe that's because they are relatives. Like, he's realizing this point that he's not really getting any sort of urges with people that are in his family, which for somebody like him, which kind of gets into the whole mind of the past Rudeus to the new Rudeus, despite the fact that he's still has his mind of his old life and how perverted he was in this new life, despite having those pervy thoughts and everything. Family's different, and he doesn't really seem like he understands why it's different. He knows it's because they're relatives, but he doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand why he doesn't see these people as something to get with. At this point, Eris is getting mad. She's like, Therese, can you let Rudeus go already? She's the entire time she's there with her chin propped up on one hand. She's drumming her fingers on the table. Super jealous. Rudeus is like, man, it's not easy to play as a playboy. But Therese is like, I understand how you feel, Eris, but there's no telling when I'll see him ever again. By the time we reunite, he'll probably have lost all of his cuteness. My sincerest apologies, but I'd like to make some memories now while I can. And as she's saying that, she starts nuzzling him even more vigorously. Of course, her speech patterns kind of catch on to Rudeus, and he asks her, like, why are you speaking so politely to Eris? And Therese says, because she saved my life. This is the point when she gets the whole story about the goblin slaying incident and everything that happened, and Eris is like, sorry, I forgot to tell you. And obviously, because of everything that happened, he realizes, you know, I can't complain. I understand why she forgot all about it. Once again, Rudeus is starting to try to figure out why he's not kind of attracted by the fact that she's constantly groping him around and nuzzling into him. She's got this, he assumes that she has this blissful look on her face behind him, but he says it doesn't feel nauseating or anything, but he says it's definitely awkward. At this point, she says, seriously though, you are just too cute, Rudeus. I could just eat you all up. At this point, Rudeus says, does that mean you want to sleep with me? And she's like, covering her mouth, you're definitely cuter than when you stay, you're definitely cuter when you stay quiet. I could so picture this. Hearing you talk brings to mind Ball Gray Rat. Just keep your mouth. And this is exactly why he shouldn't have actually gone to his family. This is exactly what would happen. He would have gone to them in the capital, and he would have been cute, and then he would have said something stupid like this, and then they would have been super mad. So this is exactly why it would have backfired. Patting his head, she decides to change subject. She's like, so anyways, Commander Gash never changes, does he? He must have known that Duke Bakshiel would react to the letter like that, but he went ahead and wrote it anyways. This is where we get a little more insight into Galgar Nash Vanek. He was a commander of the Missionary Knights of Milis. They're a mercenary force that goes out and dispatches young knights to turbulent regions. This is where they can get some real combat experiences while spreading the teachings of the Milis Church. Currently, they were between campaigns, and that's why he was there, and they were kind of returning to Milis in order to kind of bolster their ranks with new recruits. And he'd been a leader of them for some time now. He survived a disastrous expedition in the Demon Continent when he was young, and in the years since then, he's reshaped the Order to its strongest force ever. He was a brutish and quiet man who rarely smiled, but he was also known for his fairness and impartiality towards even the worst of villains, probably a little bit due to the fact of what he experienced with Reserved. In Milis, no one was considered to be a full-fledged knight unless they went on one expedition with the Missionary Knights. Their campaigns were so highly dangerous. But with the Gash in charge, more than 90% of the soldiers now return alive. He was hailed as the greatest commander the Order had ever known. Every knight in the three holy military orders respected him. Many owed him their lives. He was known for writing little and saying less. On the battlefield, he snapped off orders quickly and precisely. But at the same time, he rarely ever returned any greeting to other officers. He almost never wrote letters, merely rubber-stamped reports, so few people has ever seen his handwriting. So fake documents often kind of circulated because nobody could really kind of figure out if it's real or not, which seems a little odd to Rudeus. Like, Reserved described him as being very passionate and very talkative. But to Reserved, who was kind of closed-mouthed, anybody would seem like they're talkative. Or is a possibility that Gash acted differently around Reserved, which I would probably assume. At this point, Eris is just losing it. Hey, look, okay, are you ever going to let him go? This girl was seconds from snapping, and Rudeus kind of managed to slip out of her grasp right at that moment. At that point, Therese is like, oh, my nice, warm Rudeus. This girl's a dork. This girl's an absolute dork. I so wish we'd seen this adapted, I swear. Rudeus said she looked mildly heartbroken, but I wasn't her body pillow. And it's not like I was enjoying it anyhow. Eris is like, come over here, Rudeus. And he goes over there and sits down just as ordered, sits down next to Eris, and she quickly grabs his hand and holds on to it. Within seconds, he realized that her ears were, the tip of it was blushing as he's staring at the side of her face. Rudeus could not help from smiling. He knew exactly what was going on. At this point, Therese is bad. She's punching this pillow. He's like, man, you should punch a wall. It's much more satisfying. Therese is like, enjoy your youth while you can, kids. I'm guessing we're going with Therese being the middle-aged, never find love type of woman. I'm guessing that's the direction they're taking that character. Anyways, this is where things get a little bit heavy. As Therese says, look, all right, I forgot. There's one thing I need to warn you about, Rudeus. It might not matter too much since you're about to leave Milis, but I think you need to be aware of it. You'd be smart not to mention the word Superds within the country's borders. Rudeus is like, why is that? It says one of Milis' church's older teaching holds that demonkind should be totally expelled. They kind of point out the fact that this is kind of an old doctrine that a lot of people took really seriously, but the Temple Knights were still striving to put it into place. And of course, the Superds were particularly infamous, even amongst the other demons. If word got out that one was moving through Milis, the Knights would come out in force. Therese says, given everything he's done for Eris, I'm going to make an exception on this case. But ordinarily, I wouldn't overlook this. Eris is like, don't be ridiculous. You would never defeat Reserved in a million years. Therese says, I suppose you might be right about that. But the Temple Knights are a bunch of fanatics, and I'm afraid, myself included, we'd fight a battle even if we knew we didn't stand a chance. And so she emphasized that we should probably be careful if we ever decide that we want to return to the continent, which I think is kind of an ominous statement. And again, one of those things that I sort of wonder if would ever come up again in the anime if they ever adapted beyond this point. But again, seems kind of important, anime. But no, this whole experience itself is a huge learning point for Rudeus. At this point, he's realizing that there is a seriously deep-rooted hatred in humanity and prejudice against the demon kind. At this point, Rudeus is sort of taking another fatal blow in his desire to help the Superds. Also, noting the fact that if anybody were to ever learn that he pretty much seen Roxy as sort of a god, he might get in trouble and tortured by some inquisitor. So he might want to keep his own little personal Roxy religion to himself. Which I feel you, Rudeus. I feel you. The religion of Roxy. And this kind of wrapped things up with Therese. At this point, she kind of supplies them with all the provisions they need. She even gives them some medicine that actually works against seasickness. So apparently in this world, they don't solely rely on magic. There's actually remedies for things like that. But apparently it's just really expensive. So he's like, yay for having good connections. Additionally, he says that Therese kind of went out of her way to accommodate Eris. Like, obviously, because she saved her life, she went like the extra step to make sure that Eris was super happy. At the same time, she constantly showed her obvious distrust and hostility towards Rajerd, though nothing really ever happened. Which, yes, you can't really expect her to change her entire mind overnight. And thanks to this whole medicine that she provided, it seemed like Eris had a nice trip on the boat. She was able to be excited and enjoy it, which, yes, was a downer to him because he couldn't see Eris being all meek and weakened, which, yes, he enjoyed. But at least he got to see her happy and enjoy the ride. So it was kind of a balance. They even had some sailors teasing them, saying, hey, you lovebirds, you two getting hitched in the King Dragon realm or what? Which obviously is reference to that region. Rhea says, you bet. It's gonna be a crazy wedding. In response, Eris punches him, saying, it's way too early for us to get married. But he note that she didn't seem like she was against the idea because she looked like she was fidgeting afterwards. It seemed like her outburst was more the fact that she was getting publicly teased. Kind of following this encounter and the whole idea of marriage, he kind of found himself thinking about everybody, falling into kind of pessimism. He says he doesn't know if maybe everyone is there waiting for them, but he knew it was absurd to kind of think about it. Tearing his hair out thinking about it wasn't going to change anything. For better or worse, they put Millis behind them. And that's it. That's chapter 7. Holy crap, so good. Why wasn't this in the anime? I think, now, like I said before, everything about Zenith in volume 1, everything about Paul and Rudeus and their exchanges and how differently it felt in this one, everything about Paul in the first volume as well. This is another one of those moments where it's like, why isn't this adapted? This seems like it's kind of important. And again, I can see them kind of moving things around to make it work in the anime, but Therese seems like she's kind of important. She's a sister of his mother. It's his aunt. And additionally, how much emphasis on this chapter is on the hatred for the demon kind and everything that's happening in Millis at this moment. And sort of putting this ominous threat into Rudeus' mind, the idea that if they ever return, there's a good chance that they will see Rudeus as a threat because he once traveled with a Superd. Or if there's a possibility that he still has Rajerd with him. I guess in the grand scheme of things, and I don't want to know this one way or the other. I know people have been really good about keeping spoilers out of the comments, and I'm thankful to everybody that's been working behind the scenes to help me keep my comments clear of spoilers. But there is this kind of thought process of like, what if they ever eventually do return to the Millis continent? I don't know if they ever will. They could, but it seems like this is kind of a significant change in everything. But again, it goes back to my whole discussion about the Holy Order and all that kind of stuff that seems to be brewing in the background that will probably be significant at some point. I'm sure eventually we'll run into Cliff again. I'm sure we'll eventually run into Therese again. I'm sure at some point we might even figure out what happened with the Blessed Child. But my emphasis really, I guess, in the end is that everything always seems important with this writer. This writer doesn't involve any character unless they're important in some way. And so to have anything, especially a large portion, completely cut from the story, it makes me worried. So will it have detrimental effects to the story overall and the understanding of the characters and what they go through? We'll have to wait and see. But for right now, again, in the end, this is still here. I can still read this. So it's not that big of a deal, honestly. But it is the concern for people that are anime only. Will they ever know? I don't know. But if anything, they have this video that they can watch where they can get the scoop on what the hell they're missing from not watching or not reading the novel. So anyways, awesome chapter. Love Therese. Hope that we get to see her again. She was absolute goofball. Again, I kind of sad that we didn't get to see that adapted because she sounds like a goofball. But it was excellent. And again, really seeing a perspective of how much hatred, deep-rooted hatred is for the demon race. So anyways, that is chapter 7 of volume 5 of Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. As always, if you did, make sure to hit that like button down below, comment, let me know what I thought of this section and all the stuff that was missing. If you're an anime only, I would love to hear your perspective on what you think about all the stuff that was skipped. Additionally, if you're new to the channel, make sure that subscribe button to get all my content. I do news, reviews, first impressions, top lists. If it's anime, it's pretty much here. Also check out my playlist for Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation as we continue to go through this journey. I thank you all for your support. As always, if you want to support the channel more, we have a Patreon link, a tips link, and a super thanks button down below. I greatly appreciate everybody that considers, and y'all take care.